The north is cold and full of whispers.
The room smells of iron and candle wax and something else Ned cannot name. He has been in rooms like this before, after battles, after sieges, in the aftermath of things men do to other men, but never quite like this. The floor is stone. The candle has burned down to a nub. Outside the window, the red mountains fall away in purple shadow toward Dorne, and the fighting is finished, and there is no sound anywhere in the tower except the sound of his boots on the stairs and the sound of his sister breathing. Lyanna is on a narrow bed. Her dark hair is damp against the pillow. Her face has the color of old ivory, not pale, that word doesn't reach it, but bleached through, like cloth left too long in sun. She is 16 years old. She looks older and younger at once. She holds a bundle against her chest that moves, that breathes. Ned crosses the room and takes her hand. It is cold. The baby in her arms is not cold. It is alive in the furious way of newborn things, all heat and need, already watching the room with eyes the color of northern sky. Ned, Lyanna says. Just his name. She does not waste breath on anything extra. He sits on the edge of the bed. He does not look away from her face. He is not ready to look at the baby yet. She tells him. Not quickly, she does not have the air for speed, but completely. The marriage, a sept somewhere in Dorne, a septon whose name she will not live long enough to write down. Witnesses who are mostly dead now, a ceremony that was real and legal and that no one in the realm will ever believe. The man she chose, not the one Robert says took her, but the one she chose, because they were not the same thing. He wasn't what they said, she tells him. Her voice is very quiet, but it has no apology in it. He was what he was, and I knew. Then, the baby. His name is Aegon, she says. Aegon of houses Targaryen and Stark. She watches Ned's face when she says it. She watches it very carefully. And you're going to keep him safe. Ned looks at the child for the first time. Dark hair, gray eyes, the long face of every Stark he has ever loved. There is nothing in that face that announces what he is. There is nothing to find except a Winterfell boy, quiet and watchful and already somehow fully here in a way most people take years to arrive at. Promise me, Ned. He promises. He does not ask what it will cost. He already knows it will cost everything, and he promises anyway, and that is the last time Lyanna Stark is breathing when he looks at her face. The footsteps on the stairs are Howland's, quick and deliberate, the signal they established before Ned went up. Not all clear, not danger yet. Riders, Ned goes to the window. The southern approach is a long, rocky slope through mountain scrub, and coming up it at a pace that says urgency but not panic, is a party of 8 men on tired horses. One of them sits a horse the way only a man of that particular size sits a horse. He has perhaps 4 minutes. Ned picks up the baby and goes downstairs. Robert Baratheon does not look like a king when he dismounts. He looks like a man who has been riding since before dawn, who saw the bodies of 3rd Kingsguard in the courtyard before he got off his horse, and is holding that knowledge in a very specific way. Not grief yet, not shock, something compressed. He has always compressed things. That is how he survives them. He sees Ned in the tower doorway. Ned, his voice is rough with road dust. Where is she? Ned is carrying the baby in the crook of his left arm. He positions himself with his right shoulder against the doorframe. She's gone, Ned says. She died an hour ago. Robert's face does the thing faces do when something too large to process immediately lands on them. He goes very still. His eyes move to the bundle in Ned's arms and stay there. Whose son is that? Robert says. Not a question. He already knows. They argue in the shadow of the doorway, while Robert's men water their horses at the trough in the courtyard below. The men have been told to stay down. They are tired enough to be glad of the instruction. He is 2 days old, Ned says. He has done nothing. He is Rhaegar's son. Robert's voice is flat. Not cruel. Flat, which is worse. Rhaegar is dead, and the war is over, and the only way it stays over is if the line ends. He is also Lyanna's son. That doesn't change the math. Ned looks at him, at the man he has known since he was 8 years old, at the brother he chose when blood did not provide one, at the king who accepted the murder of Rhaegar's other children, the ones Gregor Clegane killed with his bare hands in the Red Keep while Robert sat the throne, with the equanimity of a man settling accounts. "You would murder this child," Ned says. Robert does not flinch. "I would make certain this war ends. There's a difference. There isn't. And you know there isn't. I know that Rhaegar's seed grows into Rhaegar's avenger. I know that every Targaryen heir left breathing is another war waiting. I know that I did not fight for 3 years, and watch good men die in the mud to hand the next generation a reason to do it all again." He meets Ned's eyes without moving. "I have made peace with harder decisions than this one. At King's Landing. I slept fine." The quiet after that line has weight to it. There it is. Ned has been waiting without knowing he was waiting. Robert has just said aloud what the deaths of Aegon and Rhaenys already confirmed. It is not that Robert became capable of this at King's Landing. It is that King's Landing revealed what he had always been capable of. And now he is standing in a Dornish tower, reaching for the same logic, the same math, the same sleep. And Ned is the only thing between him and it. "Move aside, Ned." Robert reaches for his warhammer. Ned moves toward him, not away. What follows is not a duel. These are two men who trained together for years, who know each other's bodies the way you only know someone you have fought beside. The tells, the weight shifts, the way a hand moves before the arm does. Ned does not reach for his sword. He does not give Robert the space to draw. He closes the distance completely, and it becomes something terrible and close and over in the time it takes a candle to gutter. He does not let himself feel it. Not yet. There is the baby to think about. Afterward, Ned is on his knees on the stone floor. His hands are shaking. The baby is still in his left arm and has not cried through any of it. Howland Reed comes through the doorway. He looks at what is on the floor. He looks at Ned. He says nothing, because there is nothing to say, and because silence is the only honest response to a thing this size. After a long moment, he crouches beside Ned. He rests his hands on his knees. "The men outside," Ned says. His voice does not sound like his own. "I know," Howland says. They speak plainly, in the flat tones of exhausted men making the only decisions left. The story, an ambush in the Red Mountains, Targaryen loyalists in the passes, no survivors, no body recovered in hostile terrain. It is a story that fits the place and the time and the chaos of a war just ended. It is a story that requires only their silence and a world that does not look too hard. "And the child?" Howland asks. Ned looks down at the baby. The gray eyes look back at him. They are Lyanna's eyes. They are Stark eyes. They give nothing away to anyone who doesn't already know. "My bastard," Ned says. Jon Snow." Howland is quiet for a long moment. Then he kneels, not to Ned, not to himself, but toward the infant in Ned's arms. A gesture older than the Citadel, older than the Iron Throne, older than almost everything in this world. "He is the blood of ice and fire," Howland says quietly. "The North will need to know that. One day. Not today," Ned says. "Not for a long time." He goes back upstairs. He sits beside his sister for a long time, in the room that smells of iron and wax and the end of things. The candle is gone now. Jon is in his lap, breathing slowly, the small heat of him the only warmth left in the tower. Ned speaks to Lyanna's face, already still, already beginning its long journey into stone, and tells her what he is going to do. The lie he will tell, the life he will build around it, what it will cost him, what it will not cost the child, because the child will be alive. And alive is the one thing he can give. When he finishes, he stands. He carries Jon to the window. The Red Mountains fall away below them in the dark, range after range, until they become Dorne, and Dorne becomes the world. Somewhere south of here, a realm is remaking itself around an absence it does not yet understand. Ned Stark is a murderer. He is a liar. He is a man who made a promise to a dying girl and will spend the rest of his life keeping it. He starts walking. The Dane household is in mourning the way great houses mourn, behind closed doors, with the grief folded small and put away where visitors cannot easily find it. Ned arrives at Starfall 3 days after the tower. He has Dawn across his back, wrapped in oilcloth, its weight familiar now in the way a bad thing becomes familiar when you have been carrying it long enough. He has Jon against his chest in a rough sling, the baby sleeping with the absolute certainty of the newly alive. He is dirty from the road and cold from the mountain passes, and he does not look like the man who won the war. He is not sure he is that man anymore. Lady Ashara Dane receives him in the great hall. She is exactly as beautiful as they said. That is the first thing Ned notices, and then he stops noticing it, because she is looking at him with eyes that have been a mask for days, the eyes of a woman who has had news she has not finished processing, who is holding herself together through the architecture of good breeding alone. Her hands, when she reaches for Dawn, do not shake. She takes the sword from him without commentary and holds it against her body the way you hold something that used to be a person. He died well, Ned says. Because that is what you say. He always said he would, Ashara answers. Her voice is even. Whatever is happening behind it stays behind it. He was very certain about that kind of thing. A silence. The hall smells of sea air and stone. Somewhere below, the Torrentine moves toward the sea. Ned broaches the baby carefully, correctly, a bastard son. He needs a wet nurse. He can pay. The woman named Willa is found, a girl from the household, quiet and steady-handed. Ned arranges it without drama and without detail, in the way a lord arranges necessary things. Ashara watches the transaction. She is not a stupid woman, but she does not ask the question that is clearly forming behind those masked eyes, and Ned does not offer her the answer. When he leaves Starfall, the lie has its first witness. From this moment, it has texture. From this moment, it exists in the world in a way that can grow beyond him. The news catches up with him on the Torrentine, moving south toward the sea. A rider hands Ned a sealed packet at a river town dock, forwarded from King's Landing, already several days old. Stannis Baratheon recognized as king. Jon Arryn named hand. The succession settled faster than anyone predicted, perhaps because a realm exhausted by 3 years of war will accept almost anything that resembles an ending. There is also a summary of the accounts circulating about Robert's death. An ambush in the Red Mountains. Targaryen loyalists, remnants of Rhaegar's cause, striking at the new king in his moment of victory. Ned Stark and one companion escaped. The body was lost in treacherous terrain. Ned reads these accounts once. Then again. There are details in them he did not plant, a number of attackers that has grown in the telling, a specific mountain pass he never named to anyone, a secondary account placing a survivor among Robert's retinue, who gave a dying testimony before expiring. That survivor does not exist. But the rumor does now. He folds the packet and puts it away. Every detail that grows without his help is a thread he cannot control. Every thread he cannot control is a way in. He has perhaps a decade before someone pulls the right one. The sea voyage north takes weeks. Howland Reed is a quiet companion on the water. He is not a man who fills silence with speech, and at sea there is a great deal of silence to fill, and he fills none of it. What conversation they have comes in the small hours, when the rest of the ship is asleep and the deck is cold, and the stars over the sunset sea are the same stars they saw from the mountain passes, just lower. How long before Stannis finds the gaps, Howland says. He does not phrase it as a question. He already has, Ned says. He just doesn't have enough yet. Then, we build the north before he does. Yes, that is most of what they say about it. The rest lives in the letters. Ned writes to Jon Arryn, condolences, loyalty, an explanation that the north requires him before he can come south. Careful. Warm. A lie of omission that Jon Arryn accepts because Jon Arryn has never had reason not to accept anything Ned tells him. He does not write to Catelyn. He has not decided what to tell her about the baby, which means he has decided and cannot yet bring himself to call it a decision. He does not write to himself. He has learned, in the last 3 weeks, that some things are safer not documented. Jon sleeps in the small cabin below. Will attends him. Ned checks on him twice a night and says nothing to him, and does not know why he keeps going down there, except that the baby is the only thing in his current world that requires nothing of him except presence. The ship calls at a Stormlands port, and the invitation is waiting at the dock. The new king requests the presence of Lord Eddard Stark at Storm's End. Storm's End receives them under grey sky. The walls are what they have always been, massive, curved, built to deflect anything the world sends against them, but they carry something now they did not carry before the siege. A mark. The way a man who has survived something carries the survival in his posture long after the wound is closed. Stannis Baratheon is 19 years old and looks 40. He is thin in the way a man goes thin after a year on near-starvation rations, not lean, but thinned, carved down to the essential structure. He has the gray iron quality of someone who learned something about endurance during that siege that other men simply have not been taught, because the only school for it is the thing itself. He sits in a carved chair in a room that still smells faintly of old smoke and old fear, with Davos Seaworth at his shoulder, and the whole architecture of a small court arranged to communicate that this is the legitimate seat of legitimate authority. He thanks Ned for his service. He speaks of Robert with formal respect. The exact words of a man discharging an obligation rather than expressing a feeling. He does not perform grief. He processes it somewhere private and files it away, and what Ned sees is the result of that filing, a man already focused entirely on what comes next. Then, almost conversationally, as if the thought has only just occurred to him, the ambush site troubles me. Lord Stark. Ned holds very still. Your Grace. Remote. No survivors except yourself and the Reed boy. Stannis's eyes are flat and steady, and give nothing away, and miss nothing. My brother was an excellent fighter. He was, Ned says. They came in numbers, and from behind. I see. A pause while Stannis turns this over with the thoroughness he applies to everything. We will have to mount an expedition to retrieve the body eventually. For burial rites. A king deserves a proper grave. The terrain is treacherous, Ned says. He selects the word carefully. The mountain passes in that region are unforgiving. The search would be costly. A pause. It lasts perhaps 3 seconds, perhaps 4. Stannis looks at him. The look is not accusing, it is measuring. There is a difference, and both men know what it is. Of course, Stannis says, and the moment passes. They put Ned in an anteroom afterward. Stone walls, a single window, 1 chair. He sits and holds Jon, who is awake, looking up at him with the gray eyes that give nothing away to anyone who doesn't already know. Ned thinks about Stannis's eyes during that pause. He has known men who suspected him before. It is the ordinary texture of politics and war. But Stannis is not an ordinary texture. Stannis is a man who never stops filing, who never forgets a distance or a timeline or the number of hours it takes to ride from one mountain pass to another, who will sit with the small wrongness of this for years, adding pieces quietly, until the shape of it becomes something he can no longer set aside. He has perhaps a decade, perhaps less. He needs every year of it. The ship clears the Stormlands coast by evening. Storm's End drops below the horizon slowly, its great round towers going last, stubborn in the way of things that have learned to hold. Jon is awake in Ned's arms, looking at him with those dark, quiet eyes, the same eyes that looked at Robert Baratheon from the crook of Ned's arm and gave nothing away. The same eyes that will look at the world that way, for as long as Ned can manage to keep the world from knowing what it is looking at. Ned looks back at him for a long moment. We have work to do, he says quietly. The ship moves north. The gates of Winterfell open just before midday. The smell hits Ned before anything else does. Cold stone, forge smoke, pine from the godswood, the particular kind of clean that exists nowhere south of the neck. He has been gone through an engagement, a wedding he barely attended his own, a war, and everything that came after the war, and the smell of home lands on him the way familiar things land on a man who has done unfamiliar things, like an accusation dressed as comfort. The keep is working. That is the first thing he notices. The forges are lit. The yard is clear. The stores are in order, and the guards are at their posts, and the household is running with the efficiency of someone who does not allow inefficiency. That is Catelyn. 3 months as Lady of Winterfell, mostly alone while her new husband finished a war, and the North is none the worse for it. She is in the courtyard waiting. She is holding Robb. Robb is not yet walking, he is close, 10 months or so, the age of enormous effort and constant ambition, and Catelyn holds him against her hip the way a woman holds a child she has been the only parent of for longer than she expected. She is 19 years old. She is composed in a way that costs something. Ned crosses the yard toward her. He is carrying the baby. She sees the baby when he is still 20 feet away. He watches her see it. She reads his face. She reads the baby's face. She reads the space between Ned and the explanation he is not offering. She is a Tully. She was raised to read rooms. She says nothing yet. This is the aristocratic version of grace under pressure. That evening. The Solar. Alone, Ned tells her plainly, without ornament or preface. Jon is his bastard son, conceived during the campaign. The mother was a woman named Willa from Dorne. He will not speak further on the subject of the mother. Catelyn listens to all of it. Her hands are in her lap. Her face is the same face she wore in the courtyard, composed, present, giving nothing away until she has processed what she is being told. Then she asks exactly one question. Is she dead? Ned holds the pause for a moment. She is not at Winterfell, he says, and she will not be. It is not an answer. It is technically not a lie, and both of them know what it is. You're bringing him here, Catelyn says. To Winterfell. To raise alongside our son. Yes, she looks at him for a long moment. The look is not rage. Catelyn Tully does not rage, she was not raised for it, and more than that she knows that rage would give him something to respond to, some shape to push back against, and she will not give him that. She is too proud for it and too wounded, and she understands, with the clarity of someone who has spent 3 months running a great house entirely alone, that some decisions cannot be unmade by the person who did not make them. Then I have nothing more to say about it tonight, she tells him. She leaves, not slamming the door, simply leaving. It closes with the quiet of something that could easily have been louder and chose not to be. Ned sits in the Solar for a while with his hands flat on the desk and the candle burning. Late, after the keep is quiet, he goes to the nursery. Jon is asleep in a cradle placed near but not beside Robb's, near enough to be cared for, not so near as to suggest equality. The nurse is gone for the night. The room is dark except for the small fire kept burning for the children's warmth. Ned stands over Jon for a long time. Then he whispers, barely, just to the dark and the sleeping child and the fire that does not care what it hears. He says the name, not Jon Snow, but the other one. He says the blood. He says what Lyanna said, and what he promised, and why. He says it once, quietly, completely, because he needs to hear it in his own voice one more time before he puts it somewhere it cannot be easily reached. Then he puts it there. This is how Ned Stark builds his stillness, not by forgetting, which is not something he is capable of, but by choosing precisely where to keep a thing, and then keeping it there, and not visiting it more than necessity demands. The grief of the tower goes in one place, the weight of Robert in another, and the truth of who Jon Snow is, he places somewhere deep and quiet and locked, somewhere with no key except need. From this night forward, he will inhabit the lie completely. Not perform it, inhabit it, because the only way to carry a lie of this size safely is to build your life around it until it has the shape of truth from every angle. He pulls Jon's blanket up with 2 fingers. Then he goes to bed. In the weeks after his return, Ned begins working. Slowly, without announcement. Maester Luwin receives a request for a full grain storage assessment, every storehouse in Winterfell, every outlying castle in the north, inventoried and projected forward 3 years. The captain of the guard receives new training protocols, stricter, longer, with an emphasis on defensive formations that northern lords haven't drilled since the Age of Heroes. Ned rides to Moat Cailin personally, which a lord might do once in a decade. He does it twice in his first year home. He walks the walls, tests the gates, examines the water control systems that can flood the causeway approaches, and turn the only road through the neck into an impassable bog. He orders repairs that exceed any plausible requirement against wildling raiding parties. He visits each of his banner lords individually, not summoning them, going to them, sitting at their tables, understanding who they are in the specific way you understand a man when you share food rather than ravens. He comes back from each visit with something filed. He writes to Howland Reed in the old Stark Code, a practice from the Age of Heroes that most lords have forgotten and Ned has kept, because Ned keeps things. The messages are short. Watching, waiting, hold the neck. The question comes on a gray morning in late autumn. Maester Luwin finds Ned in the solar with a map of the northern coast spread flat across the desk and 3 separate infrastructure requests stacked beside it. Luwin has been Maester of Winterfell since before Ned was born. He has the patience of stone and the mind of a man who has spent his life watching lords make decisions and understanding what those decisions mean before the lords do. He looks at the 3 requests. He looks at the map. He looks at Ned. "My lord," Luwin says, "you are expecting war." Ned does not look up. "The North is always expecting war. Luwin, that's why we've kept the North." It is not an answer. Luwin recognizes it as not an answer. He files it alongside the grain assessments and the Moat Cailin visits and the coded ravens going south through the neck, in the part of his mind where things that do not yet add up are stored until they do. "Of course, my lord," he says. He withdraws. He does not stop watching. On a cold afternoon in early winter, the nurse steps out of the nursery for a quarter hour, and Catelyn Tully Stark is left alone with 2 babies. She stands in the room adjusting to the quiet. Robb is asleep. Jon is not. Jon lies in his cradle, looking at the ceiling with the particular attention of a baby who has not yet learned what is interesting, and therefore finds everything interesting equally. He has the Stark look already, the long face, the gray eyes, the watchfulness. It is, Catelyn thinks, the most Stark-looking child she has seen since she came north to marry one. She crosses to the cradle. Jon meets her eyes. He holds them with the steady, placid attention of a baby who does not fuss and does not reach, and simply looks at her the way he looks at the ceiling, with thorough and uncomplicated presence. She cannot find the cruelty to be cruel to him. He is a baby, whatever the politics of it, whatever the wound. He is just a baby who did not choose his circumstances and cannot be held responsible for them, and has Stark eyes and is quietly, undeniably here. She reaches down. She pulls his blanket up with 2 fingers. Then she turns away without speaking. It is not warmth. But it is not yet the cold thing it might become. She is choosing, in this moment, not to make the choice. She is leaving the door 1 inch open and not acknowledging that she left it. Late the same night, Ned is at the writing table. The candle has burned low. The rest of the castle is asleep. He is writing to Howland Reed in the old Stark Code, in the old way, with the old careful hand. What the page says, "The seeds are planted. We will need years to grow what must be grown. Hold the neck. Watch the road south. Tell me everything." He folds it. He seals it with the direwolf. He sets it with the morning ravens. Then he sits alone in the dark for a long time, listening to Winterfell breathe around him before he goes upstairs to bed. 10 years will pass. The seeds, as he wrote, will grow. The practice yard in early morning smells of whetstone and sawdust, and the cold that settles into Winterfell's granite each autumn and does not leave until May. Jon and Robb spar with wooden swords under the eye of the master-at-arms, and the difference between them is immediately visible to anyone who understands what they are looking at. Robb Stark is 10 years old and large for it, broad already in the shoulder, with the physical confidence of a body that does what it is asked without argument. He moves like the heir to Winterfell. He attacks like it too, directly, powerfully, without feint or hesitation, because so far in his experience, the direct approach has always been sufficient. Jon is 10 years old and looks 8. Lean where Robb is broad. He moves in a way that is difficult to describe except as economical, nothing wasted, nothing decorative, every shift of his feet and shoulders in service of something specific. He does not attack. He invites. He adjusts to whatever Robb gives him and waits for the geometry of it to open. It opens. A half second of overcommitment from Robb's leading arm. Jon's wrist rotates, a specific compact motion, the kind that cannot be precisely taught, only discovered, and his feet pivot and Rob's wooden sword goes out of his hand and into the dirt. The master-at-arms blinks. He has not taught that particular combination to either of them. Rob looks at the sword in the dirt. Then he laughs, genuinely without resentment. The clean laugh of a boy who enjoys being surprised more than he minds losing, and extends his hand. Jon takes it. He does not laugh. He is already somewhere else in his head, running the wrist rotation again, checking the geometry of it from a slightly different angle, filing the adjustment. Across the yard, Ned Stark watches from beside the forge. He permits himself nothing. But his stillness has a quality to it this morning that is different from his ordinary stillness. That night. Ned's solar. 1 candle. Jon is the only child invited here. He has been the only child invited here for 3 years, since Ned decided that the history taught in the Maester's lessons was insufficient, that the library contained what Jon needed to know, and that someone needed to explain why he needed to know it. Tonight Ned has a map on the desk, and a copy of the succession laws of the 7 kingdoms open beside it, and they have been at it for an hour. The claim runs through legitimate birth, Jon says, reciting back. Not blood proximity alone. A bastard cannot inherit unless legitimized by royal decree. A marriage voided by the High Septon retroactively affects any claim derived from it. A marriage unregistered but witnessed by a septon of the faith is legally valid unless challenged within 5 years of the date of the ceremony, Ned says. Unless the challenge is brought on grounds of a prior existing marriage, in which case the time limit does not apply. What does that exception protect against? Jon thinks about it. He does not rush the thinking, against someone waiting until one party is dead to challenge the marriage. So a living party can't manufacture a prior union to void a claim they don't like. Yes, a silence. Jon looks at the succession map. He has the expression he gets when he has filed a thing and is now turning it over to see whether it fits with other things he has filed. Why does a bastard need to know who the rightful king is? He asks. Ned looks at him, at the long Stark face and the gray Stark eyes, and the thing behind them that is neither Stark nor bastard. Because when the time comes, Ned says, you'll need to know these things better than anyone. Jon holds the non-answer for a moment. He does not press. He has been learning, for as long as he can remember, that Ned's incomplete answers contain more than most men's complete ones. He files it with the rest. The Raven arrives 3 days before the Inquisitor does. It comes from a contact in King's Landing through Howland Reed's network in the Neck. Short, coded, factual, a Citadel Maester traveling north with royal authority and a specific mandate. Questions about northern military preparations. Troop assessments. Infrastructure improvements spanning the past decade. Ned reads it twice. Then he calls Lou in. Everything is to be opened for inspection. Every record made available. Every account prepared, accurate, and presented without obstruction. Ned wants the Inquisitor to find exactly what Ned has decided to show him, and the way to achieve that is to make the showing feel voluntary. He also issues one quiet instruction through a trusted guard. Jon's schedule for the next week takes him out of the main castle entirely. The Godswood. The far fields. A ride north with 2 men Ned trusts. Not hidden, if the Inquisitor asks, Jon is there, he can be found. But not offered. Let them spend 3 days finding nothing else interesting first. The Inquisitor arrives with 3 companions. He is a scholarly man, citadel chain at his collar, precise hands, the patient manner of someone who has learned that appearing uninterested is the fastest way to make people say more than they intended. His politeness is a working tool. Within the first hour, Ned notes that he is also extremely thorough. He spends a full day in the granaries, another walking the weapons stores and training yards. He traces the supply lines to the Moat Cailin improvements, with the methodical patience of a man following a thread he has been handed the end of. On the second evening, over dinner, he asks, the moat fortifications. I note you've been improving them consistently for 9 years. What is the specific threat assessment driving that? Wildling pressure is increasing, Ned says. The watch is thinning. The North cannot depend on southern response times in the event of a significant incursion. We manage ourselves or we don't manage at all. Of course, the Inquisitor cuts his meat. And the grain projections, 3 years forward, is a significant planning horizon for a peacetime household. Winter is long in the north, Ned says. Planning short is how you starve. Every answer is true. None of them is the truth. The Inquisitor makes notes without showing what he finds in them. On the third day, he asks to see the bastard. They bring Jon into the main hall at mid-morning. He is 10 years old. Clean, simply dressed, unhurried, he walks to the center of the hall and stands there and looks at the Inquisitor with steady, uncomplicated attention. The Inquisitor looks at him for a moment. Then, your age, boy, 10, sir, your interests, swords, history, the godswood, your plans. Whatever my Lord Father requires, Jon says. The Inquisitor studies him. Dark hair, gray eyes, the long northern face. A bastard who is clearly kept and educated, but not so conspicuously as to advertise anything. Nothing to find here. A lord's natural son, retained at Winterfell because the lord has the means and the will. Unremarkable, the Inquisitor makes a note and moves on. What he cannot account for, and does not write down because he cannot justify writing it down, is something in the quality of the boy's attention. The way he stood, not performing ease, but having it. The way his answers came not rehearsed but so precise they might have been. The way he looked at the Inquisitor, the way men in command of rooms look at things they are deciding what to do about. It is not something he can bring to the king. A boy stood in a hall and answered questions correctly. That is all that happened. He makes his note. He moves on. The Inquisitor's party rides south the following morning. Ned watches from the gate until the last horse rounds the far bend in the road. Then he is still for a moment. Then he sends for Jon. They stand together at the gate. Jon's shoulder just reaches Ned's arm. The road is empty and cold. "Did I pass?" Jon asks. Ned looks at him. At Lyanna's son, 10 years old, already carrying something heavy without knowing exactly what it is or what it is for. Already shaped. Already beginning to be the thing Ned has spent 10 years building. One lesson at a time. One coded raven at a time, one quiet improvement to an ancient causeway at a time. "You were born to pass," Ned says. A pause. Wind off the northern fields. "But he'll be back. Or someone else will." Jon considers this, not with fear, with the same expression he had in the sparring yard after the disarm. Already somewhere inside his own mind, filing, adjusting, preparing for the next thing. "Then we'll pass again," Jon says. Ned has a look on his face that Jon is not quite old enough to read. Grief and pride pulled so tightly together, they have become a single thing with no name that fits them both. "Yes," Ned says. "We will." In King's Landing, the Inquisitor's report reaches Stannis Baratheon within a fortnight. The bastard is unremarkable. The North's military preparations exceed any visible threat, but fall within the range of justifiable northern caution. Lord Stark is cooperative, transparent, and entirely unhelpful. Stannis reads the report once, then again. Then he sits for a long time looking at the wall. The bastard's age is right. The North has been fortifying since the year Ned Stark came home from the war, and the timeline of that ambush in the Red Mountains still does not resolve. No matter how many times Stannis runs the distances and the hours against each other, he does not send another Inquisitor. He decides, quietly, without announcement, that the next time someone goes north to look at what Ned Stark has been building, it will be him. The table in Stannis Baratheon's private council room holds no food, no drink, and no maps of current campaigns. What it holds is paper. Timelines, distances, statements recorded from witnesses now 14 years old, travel calculations run and rerun in a hand so precise it barely looks human. Stannis has been building this since the year he became king. Davos Seaworth stands at the other side of the table, reading the same documents for the third time in an hour. He is the only man in the Seven Kingdoms that Stannis trusts with information he has not yet decided what to do with, not because Davos is clever, though he is, but because Davos is honest in the complete and practical way of a man who spent his life being told the truth by the sea. The distance, Stannis says. He does not look up from the timeline, from the Tower of Joy to the pass where Robert was supposedly ambushed. A man riding hard covers that distance in 18 hours. Ned's account places the ambush 6 hours after the Tower of Joy fight. That means either Ned rode to the pass immediately after the fighting ended, without stopping, without tending the wounded, without sending ravens, or the ambush did not happen where the account says it did. Davos looks at the distances. He does not immediately argue. There are also the Kingsguard, Stannis continues. 3 of them at the tower, not at a garrison, not guarding a supply route, at a tower in the Dornish mountains, which the Kingsguard have no formal reason to guard unless they are guarding a person. And Robert rode to that tower specifically, which means Robert knew they were there, which means Robert knew exactly what was in it. His Grace went to collect the body, Davos says carefully, not arguing. Testing, His Grace went to the tower and died in a mountain pass 6 hours later, Stannis says. With only Ned Stark and Howland Reed to witness it, in terrain where no body was recoverable. He straightens, I have run this 40 times. The numbers do not produce the story we were given. Davos is quiet. Outside the window, King's Landing produces its ordinary noise, carts on stone, distant shouting, harbor water and 4 decades of settlement baked into the air. Nothing like the north, which Davos has never been to, and is increasingly certain he will shortly visit. What does your Grace intend to do? Go north, Stannis says. See for myself what Ned Stark has been building for 15 years, and look at the bastard. Davos looks at him. You think the bastard is something else. I think Ned Stark does not do things without reason. I think he has spent 15 years and considerable resource turning the north into a fortress. And I think men who build fortresses are protecting something specific. A pause. And I think the bastard is 13 years old, which is exactly how old the child born at the Tower of Joy would be. Davos absorbs this. If that's true, Your Grace, then the conversation I have been intending to have with Ned Stark for 14 years, Stannis says, is overdue. He marches with several thousand men, enough to communicate that this is not an ordinary visit, not enough to be an unambiguous act of war. The distinction is technically accurate and practically meaningless. In the neck, Howland Reed's men find the column within a day of it crossing onto the marshland roads. They do not engage it. They watch it, count it, and send ravens north in quick succession. The message that reaches Ned at Winterfell is short. Howland Reed is not a man who wastes words on anything except precision. He is coming. With purpose. Ned reads it and does not panic. He has been waiting for something like this since the year after Storm's End. He simply did not know precisely when, or in precisely what form. The Bannerlords are summoned over the following days, quietly, each with a plausible reason attached. A dispute over grazing rights in the upper hills. A question about new garrison rotations. A review of the grain distribution schedule before the first snows. Men arrive at Winterfell in 1s and 2s and small groups, stabling their horses in the outer yards, taking their meals in the great hall, going about the ordinary business of lords attending their liege. To anyone watching from a distance, it is routine administration. It is also, if viewed correctly, an army assembling in place. On the evening before Stannis' advance riders are expected, Ned finds Jon in the training yard, practicing footwork drills alone in the dark with a short sword. Which is how Jon spends his evenings when something is occupying his mind that he has not yet been given permission to discuss. Ned watches him for a moment. Then, walk with me. They walk the outer wall. The north is clear and cold and very quiet. Below them, the yard holds horses that were not there a week ago. Jon has already noticed them. Jon notices everything. The king comes north, Ned says. I know. He will have questions I cannot answer honestly, not in the way he'll want them answered. Not in front of his men. Not yet. Ned chooses his next words with the specific care he brings to things that cannot be taken back. If things move badly, Jon, I need you to ride for the neck immediately. To Howland Reed. Without argument. Jon is quiet for a moment. Why can't you answer honestly? Ned looks at him. At 13 years old. At what 13 years of deliberate building has made. Because some truths are too heavy for a normal road, he says. They need better ground under them before they can be walked. Jon turns the non-answer over the way he turns everything, looking at each face of it, finding what it is not saying, filing that beside everything else he has filed. He has been reading Ned's incomplete answers for long enough to understand them as a language. "All right," Jon says. His tone means, "I heard you. I am not promising." Ned looks at him a moment longer than necessary. Then they walk back down. Stannis rides into Winterfell's outer yard with a retinue of 12. His larger force camps south of the castle walls. This is protocol. It is also a statement he does not require numbers to manage what is inside these gates. He is older than when Ned last saw him. He looks exactly as old as he is, which with Stannis is a form of integrity, because he has never once bothered to appear otherwise. Thinner than 14 years ago. Harder, carrying the weight of a reign that gave him everything he was owed and almost nothing he wanted. Ned meets him at the gate. They are similar in height. They stand close enough that neither has to raise his voice. They look at each other across 15 years of silence and carefully maintained ravens and one meeting at Storm's End that neither of them has ever directly discussed. "Lord Stark," Stannis says. "Your Grace," Ned says. The words are correct. Everything underneath them is not. The dinner is everything a feast in the north is, loud with firelight, layered with subtext. The northern lords fill the long tables. Stannis' retinue occupies the far end of the high table with the careful separateness of men who understand they are guests and are not pretending otherwise. Stannis eats without appearing to eat and asks questions without appearing to ask them. The grain situation in the eastern territories. Wildling activity north of the last river. The specific engineering improvements at Moat Cailin, when they were begun. What prompted them? Who designed the water control modifications? Ned answers each question with the same quality of answer he has been providing to inquisitors and maesters and curious ravens for 15 years. True things that together add up to nothing. An architecture of honest misdirection so well constructed he could give the same answers in his sleep. But Stannis is not listening only to the answers. He is watching Jon. Not obviously, not in a way that anyone at the high table would register as pointed, but his eyes return to the bastard's table at the far end of the hall with the systematic regularity of a man cataloging a data point he cannot yet explain. The dark hair. The gray eyes. The way the boy sits, not with the comfortable ease of a well-kept bastard at his lord's table, but with the particular stillness of someone monitoring a room. The way Jon holds himself without slouching. The way he eats without looking at his food. The way his eyes move across the hall with quiet efficiency, noting faces, noting the positions of men he does not know, noting the exits. Not nervously. Professionally, Stannis thinks, that is not how a bastard watches a room. That is how a man who expects to be responsible for rooms watches a room. A man trained to monitor his surroundings as preparation for one day being accountable for what happens in them. He files it. He does not look at Jon again for the remainder of the meal. After the plates are cleared and the cups refilled, Stannis sets down his wine and speaks in the mild, conversational tone of a man making a small and natural request. "Lord Stark, I should like to see the crypts if you'll permit it. To pay respects to Lady Lyanna. I never had the occasion, and it has been long since I thought about what she meant to my brother." "Of course, Your Grace," Ned says. "The honor would be Winterfell's. It is the only answer a lord can give a visiting king." Ned gives it without visible hesitation and with the exact warmth the occasion requires. What he does not do is look at Jon. But his hand, resting on the cup, tightens. The knuckles go briefly white against the pewter. Across the hall, Jon looks at Ned. He has been watching rooms for 13 years. He knows what a tightened grip means. He reads Stannis. He reads the table. He reads the precise quality of the silence that followed the request and the precise quality of the answer that ended it. He knows something is coming that the evening has not yet named. Ned stares at the table. He gives Jon nothing, not even a glance. They go to the crypts in the morning. 3 of them descend into the dark. Ned leads with the torch. Stannis behind him. Jon last, at Ned's quiet request, a request Stannis received with a raised eyebrow and then set aside, because he is a man who allows for the possibility that he does not yet understand the reason for a thing. The crypts of Winterfell run long and deep. The walls are lined with the dead, kings of winter stretching back beyond recorded history. Their faces worn by centuries to mere suggestions of faces, iron swords across their stone laps to keep their spirits from walking. The torch does not illuminate so much as negotiate with the darkness, pushing it back a few feet on each side and leaving everything beyond that boundary to its own business. Their boots on the stone are the only sound. The air is cold in the specific way of underground places, not the clean cold of the north above, but a cold that has been sealed here for a very long time and has become something denser, something that has absorbed the weight of everything stored in it. Lyanna's tomb is the newest, the sharpest. The stone has not had enough centuries to blur her face into the general suggestion of a face. She is still specific. Stannis stands before the effigy for a long moment without speaking. He does not bow his head or press his hands together or arrange his face into shapes of visible grief. He simply looks at the carved likeness of a woman he never met, who his brother loved enough to start a war over, and he is quiet with an absence of performance that in any other man would simply be coldness. With Stannis it is the opposite. She was everything to him, Stannis says. His voice has the careful, almost formal quality it takes on when he is managing something that would otherwise be unmanageable. He went to war over her. He killed Rhaegar Targaryen with his own hands over her. And she still died. A pause. He told me once that he would have ended the war differently if she had lived. I never knew what he meant by that. Ned says nothing. The torch burns. The dead kings press in from both sides of the corridor behind them. Stannis turns from the effigy, slowly, not to Ned first, to Jon. He looks at the boy the way he has been looking at him all evening, cataloging, but here in the crypts there is nothing to manage around the look, no dinner conversation to return to, no lords observing him observe. You were here, Stannis says to Ned, when she died. You found her. Not a question. Yes, Ned says. And the boy was with you. Also, not a question. The silence that follows belongs to the decision Ned is making. Jon looks at him across it. The question between them needs no words. Is this when? Has Ned decided? Ned has decided. He decided years ago, in the part of himself where decisions that actually matter are made quietly and then held. He decided that if the moment ever came to this specific room, with this specific weight, standing in front of his sister's face, carved in stone, he would not lie. He has lied to the world for 15 years. He has lied to Robert's brother, and to his wife, and to his sons, and to every man who has ever looked him in the eye and trusted what they saw there. He will not do it one more time in the place where Lyanna sleeps. I'll tell you, Ned says, both of you. He tells it plainly, without ornament, without apology, in the flat. Deliberate voice he uses for things that require every word to carry exactly its own weight and nothing extra. The marriage, a sept in Dorne, a septon of the faith, witnesses who are now dead. Not abduction, not the story Robert told, a ceremony performed willingly by both parties, legal under every law the Seven Kingdoms recognize. Rhaegar and Lyanna were married. The child born from that marriage is legitimate. The name Lyanna gave the child Aegon of houses Targaryen and Stark. The sixth of his name. Jon Snow is the legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen. His claim to the Iron Throne supersedes any Baratheon succession. It supersedes Stannis. It supersedes everything that followed Robert's coronation, because it predates the war that made Robert king. Ned finishes. The crypts are very quiet. Jon sits down on the floor. Not dramatically, his legs simply stop cooperating, and he puts his back against the cold stone of a king's plinth and stays there, as though his body has made a decision his mind has not caught up with yet. He does not speak. He looks at the space in front of him. Stannis is silent for 10 seconds. Perhaps 15. He is not a man who reacts before processing, and what he is processing is large enough to require the full interval. And my brother, Stannis says, finally. He does not phrase it as a question. He opens a door. Robert found us at the tower, Ned says. He knew whose son Jon was. He drew his warhammer. The silence after that has a weight the earlier silences did not. And you killed him, Stannis says. Yes, a longer silence. Stannis turns this fact over the way he turns all facts, completely, without flinching from any face of it. You committed regicide, Stannis says. His voice has not changed register. It carries the same careful control it used to speak of Robert's grief, which makes it more terrible, not less. You hid a rival claimant to my throne for 15 years. You armed the North for a war that has not been declared. You looked me in the eye at Storm's End and told me your brother died in an ambush. I made a promise to my sister, Ned says. Your promise nearly broke the realm. Your brother was about to murder a child who had done nothing, whose only offense was existing. Ned does not raise his voice. He has never needed to. He told me he had made peace with harder decisions. He said it without shame. I had already watched him accept the murders of Lyanna Martell's children as a cost of doing business. When he reached for his warhammer, I knew exactly what kind of man I was stopping. Silence, Stannis does not say. He was a Targaryen. The words exist somewhere in his throat, and he does not speak them. He is standing in front of the proof that they would be inadequate. The boy on the floor has dark hair and gray eyes and a Stark's long face, and was born 13 years ago at a tower in Dorne. If that boy is a Targaryen, then Targaryen blood does not produce the thing Robert feared. It produces this, a northern boy sitting on a crypt floor processing the weight of a name he has never heard applied to himself. He does not say, he was a Targaryen. He says nothing at all. Jon speaks from the floor. His voice is level. He is 13 years old, and the composure in him is frightening in the specific way that composure is frightening when it belongs to someone too young to have earned it by any ordinary means. What happens now? Not to Ned. To Stannis. Stannis looks at the boy who is apparently his predecessor's grandson and his dead brother's answer, and a bastard's name on a northern bastard's face. That depends on what the law says. And what does the law say? Stannis is quiet for a moment. The law says you are Rhaegar Targaryen's son, that your claim supersedes mine. That is not something I will accept without evidence reviewed by the Citadel and a full council of the great lords, and, he stops, disciplines himself back to the essential. The law also says that the word sits incorrectly in the sentence, and all three of them hear it, father committed regicide. That is not a law I can overlook. Jon absorbs this. So the law says, you should kill him, and take me south. The law requires an accounting. Jon stands up from the floor. He does it without hurry. In the torchlight he is entirely Stark. The face, the eyes, the quality of stillness that costs nothing to maintain, because it is simply what he is. But the way he stands is different from how a Stark stands. He stands like a man who has just been told he carries weight he did not previously know about and has decided, in the space of a single breath, to use it. Then the law has a problem, Jon says quietly. Because I won't go south without him. Stannis says he requires one night to consider. He will give his answer in the morning. He goes back up the stairs without further word, his boots climbing through stone back toward the castle, leaving Ned and Jon alone in the dark with one burning torch and centuries of dead Starks keeping their patient watch. Jon crosses to Lyanna's effigy. He does not kneel. He stands before it the way Stannis stood, looking at a face in stone that he carries in his blood without ever having seen it living. He puts his hand on the carved stone. She was my mother, he says. She was everything, Ned says. The torch, the weight of the place doing what it has always done to people who stand in it long enough. Did she know what she was asking you to do? Jon asks. Ned is quiet for a long time, long enough that the question almost answers itself. She knew what she was asking me to promise, he says finally. I don't think she knew all of what that promise would require. Jon looks at the stone face, at the carved likeness of a woman who died at 16, making a man swear to something she had no right to ask and he had no ability to refuse. Would you have said no? Ned looks at him, at his sister's face in a Stark boy's bones, At the 13 years of deliberate building that stand before him in this corridor, asking the only question that has ever mattered. No, Ned says, simply, without hesitation, without qualification. Jon takes his hand from the effigy. They go back upstairs. Below them, Lyanna sleeps. The answer comes in the morning. Dawn finds the great hall cold. The fires have been burning since before first light, but the cold in Winterfell's stones runs deep enough that fires take time to persuade it, and this morning the hall has not been persuaded. Both retinues are present, Ned's northern lords at their benches, Stannis' men standing in their southern clothes with the faint discomfort that southerners always carry in the north in autumn. The space between them has a quality to it, not hostile, not yet, just clarified. Stannis stands at the center of the hall. He does not sit. He speaks in the measured cadence of a man delivering a judgment he prepared before dawn and has reviewed for error several times since. His terms are these. The individual claiming to be Aegon Targaryen will travel south as a ward of the crown. His identity claim requires verification by the Citadel's senior maesters and a council of the great lords assembled for the purpose. In the interim, he will be housed in King's Landing under royal guarantee. Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, will stand trial before that same council for the crime of regicide. Stannis has Ned's own admission given willingly, witnessed by 3 parties in the crypts. He does not require further evidence. When Stannis finishes, the hall is very still. He is not accused. He has not threatened. He has stated the law, applied it to the available facts, and announced the conclusion. He could not be more reasonable, and everyone in the room understands precisely what that reasonableness is designed to accomplish. Ned says, "No." Not, "Give me time to consider this." Not, "I need to speak with my lords." One word, immediate, without inflection, as though the consideration had already taken place, and this was simply its result. Stannis looks at him for a moment. "You are in open defiance of your king, Lord Stark. Then I am in open defiance of my king," Ned says. The northern lords move. Not dramatically, no swords drawn, no raised voices, no performance of any kind. They simply find new positions. Weight shifts. Men who had been sitting at benches are standing. Men who had been standing apart are standing together. The geometry of the hall reorganizes itself in 10 seconds, and when it stops reorganizing, the space between Ned's people and Stannis' people is no longer something that requires interpretation. Stannis looks at the new geometry. He processes it. He does not reach for his sword. He is too controlled for that, and besides, his sword is not the point. The point is the law, and the law does not require his sword right now. What moves instead is one of his Kingsguard, a large man standing to Stannis' right, wearing the expression of someone who has spent years in service to a king who resolves everything through protocol and precedent, a man who has been waiting a long time for something to be resolved through him. He steps forward. He takes Jon's arm, not gently. Jon is 13 years old. He has been training since he could hold a practice sword with a man whose stated purpose was to make him the best swordsman in every room he ever entered. The grip on his arm communicates several things simultaneously: the angle of pressure, the positioning of the Kingsguard's feet, the direction of likely follow-through. His wrist rotates. He steps back. His elbow moves through a specific arc. The Kingsguard's hand opens. The Kingsguard blinks at his own empty hand for half a second. Then he draws his sword. Jon has the long knife from his belt in both hands before the sword clears the scabbard entirely. He does not advance. He does not retreat. He holds his ground with his weight forward and the blade up, and the particular stillness of someone who is not performing readiness, but simply being ready. What follows occupies perhaps 90 seconds of real time in a space of 30 feet. It is not a battle. It has no grandeur and no space and no audience of thousands. It is 2 people in a stone hall with tables pressing in from both sides and columns interrupting the sightlines, and what it reveals about Jon Snow is not what a battle would reveal. A battle reveals endurance. This reveals something more specific. The Kingsguard is trained and experienced, and twice Jon's weight, and carrying a sword against a knife. He moves like what he is, a professional who has won real fights and who expects to resolve this one quickly by closing the distance and using mass. Jon does not let him close the distance. He moves the way 13 years of deliberate building has taught him to move, economically, with nothing decorative and nothing wasted, making the geometry of the space work for him rather than against him. The knife is not trying to beat the sword, it is trying to make the sword irrelevant. Every time the Kingsguard commits to a line of attack, Jon is not there. Every time the Kingsguard adjusts, Jon has already adjusted first. He is fast, not recklessly fast, precisely fast, which is different and harder. He is thinking of this the way he thinks of everything, as a problem with a specific solution. The solution is not kill the man, the solution is stop the man. The cut, when it comes, is deliberate and exact. A short, angled stroke to the inside of the Kingsguard's sword arm, at the gap between vambrace and glove. Deep enough to open the hand, controlled enough not to open anything else. The sword hits the stone floor, the Kingsguard grips his arm. He does not fall. He looks at the boy in front of him, this 13-year-old breathing hard, with a blood-streaked knife still up in two hands, with an expression that has not settled into anything he knows the name for. Jon steps back. He is breathing hard. He is 13. But he is standing. Stannis, who has not moved through any of this, observes it with the flat, continuous attention of a man updating a model. Enough, Ned's voice does not fill the room the way a shout fills a room. It fills it the way a command fills it, from somewhere below the volume, where the authority actually lives. From a man who spent years making himself be obeyed in conditions where being obeyed was the difference between dying and not. Everything stops. Blood on the stone floor. The Kingsguard with his hand pressed to his forearm. Jon with the knife still up, weight still forward, still ready for whatever comes next. "Your Grace," Ned says, quietly, "no blood will be shed in this hall today beyond what has already been shed." Stannis looks at the wounded Kingsguard. At Jon. At Ned. At the northern lords standing in positions they did not begin the morning in. He runs the calculation with the speed of a man who has been running calculations his entire life. "Escort my men to their quarters," he says. His voice gives nothing away. "We will continue this conversation in the morning." The retinues separate. The hall empties in the careful way of two groups of armed men who have just understood something about each other and are taking that understanding somewhere private to examine it. Jon is the last one left in the hall. He stands in the middle of it, looking at what happened here. Blood on the stone. A sword someone has already removed. The scattered configuration of benches that shifted during the geometry change. There is blood on his knife. There is blood on his knuckles, where the Kingsguard's elbow caught him during a pivot. He noted it at the time, and is noting it again now. He had not felt it during the fight. He is feeling it now. Ned comes back into the hall. He crosses to Jon, looks him over. "Are you hurt?" "No," Jon says. "Then, did I do it right?" Ned looks at him, at Lyanna's son, 13 years old, asking whether he performed correctly in the situation he has been prepared for since he was small enough to hold a wooden sword in two hands. "You're alive. He's disarmed and not dead." "Yes, I didn't want to kill him," Jon says. Not as an apology, as a statement of what happened in his decision process during those 90 seconds. "I just needed him to stop." Ned is quiet for a moment. "That's the difference," he says, "between a warrior and a killer. You chose the stop. You could have chosen the finish. You chose the stop." Jon looks at his knife. "Does that matter?" "It's the only thing that matters." By the time the sun drops below Winterfell's western wall, the gates are closed. Stannis' retinue is housed in the eastern guest quarters. Guests is the word being used. Both sides understand what the word is doing and what it is not doing, and neither side says anything about the gap between the two. The larger force camped south of the castle walls is in a similar state of suspended definition, not besieging, not withdrawing, occupying a category that does not yet have a clean name. Ravens go out before dark. One to Howland Reed in the neck, one to every northern bannerlord not already present within Winterfell's walls. The messages are short and specific, and do not ask questions. In his room, Jon cleans the knife by candlelight. He works carefully and methodically the way he does everything. The blood comes off the blade clean. He sets it down on the table beside the candle and lies back on his bed and stares at the ceiling. He does not sleep. What happens in the morning is no longer a conversation. It is a declaration. He tells her before anyone else. Not because the timing is ideal. No timing for this would be ideal, and he has known that for 15 years. He tells her because she has been wronged in the specific and irreversible way that only a person who loves you can wrong you, and if the rest of the world is about to know the truth, she cannot learn it with them. The Solar. Alone, the door closed. He tells her plainly, without flinching, without asking for anything in return, not understanding, not absolution, not even patience. He tells her about Lyanna, about Rhaegar, about the tower and the bed of blood, and the name Lyanna spoke before she died, about Robert, and what Robert was about to do, and what Ned did instead, about Jon, what Jon actually is, what Jon has always been, what Ned has spent 15 years building him toward in silence. He tells her all of it. Catelyn listens without speaking. She sits with her hands in her lap and her face doing the same work it has always done, composed, present, giving nothing away until she has processed what she is being given. She does not interrupt. She does not look away. She listens the way a woman listens when she is deciding what she will do with what she hears before she has finished hearing it. When he finishes, the Solar is very quiet. "You asked me to love a child," Catelyn says finally, "that I thought was proof of your betrayal. And he was never that at all. I know what I asked of you." No, her voice does not rise. It does not waver. "You don't. Because you knew the truth. You were carrying the real story the whole time. I only ever had the lie." She looks at him. "I only ever had the lie, Ned, and I built everything I felt about that child on top of it. Every cold look, every turned shoulder, every time I chose not to see him at meals or greet him in the yard. I built all of that on your lie." He says nothing. "There is nothing to say. But I have watched him grow," Catelyn says. Something shifts in her expression. Not softness, not yet, but the particular look of a woman making an accounting she had not expected to have to make. Whatever he is, whatever his blood, he is good. He is genuinely good. And I have been unkind to a good person for 15 years because I did not have the truth I deserved. She stands. She is not weeping. She is a Tully. She was raised to be stronger than her grief, and she is. And it costs her something that will not be repaid quickly. "I won't stand beside you in the hall," she says, "but I won't stand against you." She leaves. Ned sits in the empty Solar for a long time afterward, looking at the desk where he has written so many letters that could never say the thing that mattered most. Howland Reed rides through Winterfell's gates at mid-morning. He has aged. The neck ages men in a particular way. The cold water and the permanent damp working on a body until it becomes something that belongs to that landscape and nowhere else. He is small, quiet, dressed in nothing that announces what he is. He finds Ned in the outer yard, and they embrace briefly, the embrace of two men who share a secret that has spent 15 years becoming heavier, not lighter. Then, Howland looks past Ned's shoulder for Jon. He finds him standing near the stables, watching the yard. Howland crosses to him without ceremony and kneels. Jon's face does the thing it does when something catches him unprepared, a brief, unguarded moment before the composure returns. "Please don't." Howland rises. He is a head shorter than Jon, and looks at him with the direct, unhurried attention of a man who has been imagining this meeting for 13 years. "I kneel for your mother's courage and your father's pride," he says. "The standing is mine." Jon holds his gaze for a moment, then he offers his hand. Howland takes it. "I knew your mother," Howland says. "She would have liked you." "Jon, what was she like?" Howland considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. Fiercer than anyone deserved, more loving than she let on. She had the North in her blood and the world in her eyes. He pauses. "She laughed like she was daring you to laugh with her, and when she was angry, even your father stepped back." Jon absorbs this. "My father," he says. And something in the way he says it is not a correction. He is not talking about Rhaegar. He is talking about the man across the yard who is watching them from beside the gate with an expression that is too controlled to name. Howland follows Jon's gaze. "Nods, yes," he says. "That one." The great hall fills through the morning. Every bannerlord who received a raven answered it. The benches are full. The galleries are full. Standing men line the walls. Stannis and his retinue occupy the space assigned to them. They had been informed, through proper channels, that attending the morning's proceedings would be advisable. Stannis came because he is a man who understands that the information gathered by attending things you disapprove of is more valuable than the principle satisfied by refusing. Ned stands at the Lord's seat at the hall's head. He does not sit. He does not read from a scroll. He does not prepare his audience or thank them for coming or announce what he is about to tell them. He simply tells them, plainly, without performance, without apology, in the specific voice he uses when something requires every word to carry its own weight and no other. The voice he has been keeping for this moment for 15 years, not polishing it, not rehearsing it, just keeping it for when it was needed. He tells them about the Tower of Joy, about Lyanna and Rhaegar, about the marriage and the child and the name and the promise. He tells them what he did and why he did it, and who the boy he brought home as his bastard actually is. The hall is quiet the way a room is quiet when people are not breathing correctly. He names Jon, Aegon of Houses Targaryen and Stark, the sixth of his name, the legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, born at the Tower of Joy in the Red Mountains of Dorne and raised at Winterfell for 13 years. The rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms. Then he stops speaking. The silence lasts perhaps 5 seconds. Lord Jon Umber, who has fought for the Starks since before Ned was born, puts both fists on the table in front of him and slams them down once. The sound of it goes through the hall like a bell. The king in the north. The hall answers him. Jon stands in the center of it, 50 men kneeling. The sound of his name, his other name, the name he has been carrying for 13 years without knowing it, moving through the hall in a wave that he can feel against his chest. He is 13 years old. In any identity that matters, he is approximately 3 days old, and both of those things are true simultaneously, and neither cancels the other. He raises one hand. The hall quiets. "I don't know if I'm worthy of this," he says. His voice carries. It has always carried. Ned made sure of that. He waits for the full silence before he continues. "I know that I am Lyanna Stark's son. I know that Ned Stark raised me, and that I would follow him into any darkness without question or hesitation. If you're kneeling because of my blood, I can't stop you. That's your right." A pause. "But I would rather earn what you're giving me than inherit it. I would rather be worth this than simply be born to it." The hall is quiet in a different way now. Not the breathless quiet of before. Something considering. "I don't know yet who I am," Jon says, "but I know what I want to be. And I'll spend however long it takes to get there." It is not the speech of a man who wants a crown. That is precisely why it is the speech of a man who might be worth one, and the northern lords in their benches understand this in the wordless way that men who have followed leaders all their lives understand the difference between performance and substance. The hall answers him again, louder this time. Stannis does not kneel. He will never kneel. That is not a statement about Jon. It is a statement about Stannis, who has not knelt to anyone since he was a child, and who will not begin now in a northern hall, while the question of the throne is still technically unresolved. But he watches Jon make that speech. He watches with the flat, continuous attention he brings to everything, and something in his expression recalibrates, not warmly. Because nothing with Stannis is warm, but with something that in a different man might be called recognition. He has spent 15 years in a court full of men who want power. He knows the precise texture of it, the way it sounds, the way it moves, the specific quality of performance that accompanies genuine desire for the thing. That was not it. His hand, which has been resting near the pommel of his sword since he entered the hall, moves away from it. He does not appear to notice that it has moved. He does not acknowledge that anything has changed. But the hand is no longer near the sword, and it does not return there for the remainder of the morning. Maester Luwin records it. He records it in the precise, careful hand of a man who understands that what he is writing will be cited for generations, and who takes that responsibility with the full weight of his citadel training. He records the names, the date, the claim, the witnesses, the relevant precedents from succession law. He records everything Ned said, word by word, as best he can reconstruct it from his notes. Ravens fly within the hour, to every corner of the north, to the citadel for formal registration, to Howland Reed's contacts in the neck for relay south, to John Arryn in King's Landing, Ned's letter careful and complete, telling the hand everything Ned has told the Hall, giving him the truth he has also deserved for 15 years. By nightfall, the realm will know. By morning, Stannis will have to choose. That evening, Ned stands alone in the great hall after everyone has gone. The torches burn. The benches are empty. The room still holds the quality of what happened in it, something that was a secret for 15 years, and is a secret no longer. He has made 2 acts in his life that will define everything that comes after. The first was at a tower in Dorne. He made it out of love and grief and the terrible clarity of a man watching a pattern complete itself in real time. The second was today, in this hall. The first made the second necessary. And both of them, taken together, cost him everything he had to give. He does not think this produces a ledger that balances. He is not sure it should. He turns down the torch nearest the door and goes upstairs. Stannis' army enters the neck expecting a road, and finds something else entirely. 2 million acres of it, marshland and shifting channels and floating islands of peat that look like solid ground from a distance and are not. The single navigable causeway runs north through the center of it, ancient and narrow, funneling everything that tries to pass through a corridor of raised stone that has been breaking southern armies since men first decided the north was worth taking. Moat Caelan sits at the causeway's throat. Its towers are half ruined, and its walls are old enough to predate the memory of anyone living. But the water control systems work exactly as they were designed to work, and what they were designed to work toward is the drowning of anyone who tries to come through without permission. Stannis cannot go around the neck. There is no around. He must go through it, which means he must go past Howland Reed's Crannogmen, who have lived in the marsh for so many generations that the marsh is no longer a place they navigate. It is a place they are. They are small, and they do not fight in lines, and they do not fight at dawn or dusk like proper armies are supposed to. They fight at the moment of their choosing from positions that do not exist until those positions are needed. And they use arrows with tips coated in something that does not need to kill immediately to be effective. And then they return to the water, which closes over them the way water closes over everything. Stannis' army begins to bleed, slowly, without finding anyone to face directly. Ned's second front runs on paper and ravens, and 15 years of relationships built in the quiet before this became a war. The ravens go south within the first week. Not to incite, incitement can be dismissed as desperation. What goes south is fact, stated plainly in Ned Stark's voice, which even his enemies know to be reliable. Stannis Baratheon is marching north to suppress the legitimate claim of Aegon Targaryen, the 6th of his name, whose identity has been verified by Howland Reed and documented with the Citadel. The claim supersedes Stannis' own. The law says so. Ned provides the specific citations. The raven to the reach reaches Highgarden. The Tyrells have nursed the memory of Storm's End for 15 years. Mace Tyrell's siege that Stannis survived on starvation rations, that Stannis never forgave, that Stannis has made clear in 100 small ways he will never forgive. The Tyrells read Ned's letter and find it interesting. The raven to Dorne reaches Sunspear. Prince Doran Martell's sister was Lyanna Martell, whose murder Tywin Lannister commissioned and Robert Baratheon accepted. The son of Rhaegar Targaryen is alive and in the north, and his identity is documented. Doran Martell is not a man of quick action. He is a man who sits with information until it has ripened into something useful. He sits with this one. The raven to Casterly Rock reaches Tywin Lannister, who reads it once, sets it down, and sits very still for a very long time. Then, he does not send Stannis the military reinforcement Stannis was quietly expecting. The reason he gives is logistical. The real reason is Tywin Lannister, doing exactly what Tywin Lannister does when presented with a situation where the right move is the one nobody expects. He does nothing. He waits. He watches which way the water flows. Jon is present in the Northern Army, but not commanding it. He is learning what an army looks like from the inside, which is different from what it looks like from any other angle. He rides with Ned. He watches how Ned reads a battlefield, not in the dramatic sense, not looking for glory or decisive moments, but in the administrative sense, counting lines, tracking supply positions, understanding what the ground costs in terms of men and time, and the specific kinds of exhaustion that are recoverable and the kinds that aren't. He watches how Ned makes decisions under pressure without appearing to make decisions, which is what actual command looks like when it's working correctly. At intervals, Ned steps back. He presents Jon with a situation and asks what he would do with it. Jon answers, and Ned listens and says nothing evaluative, just listens, and moves on. The test comes at a secondary crossing in the eastern neck, a narrow passage between two bog channels that Stannis' advanced scouts have identified as a potential flanking route around Moat Cailin. The main northern force is with Ned at the causeway. The crossing is given to Jon with 8 men and Howland Reed, who tells Jon everything he needs to know about the ground and then says nothing further. Jon spends 3 days on the ground before Stannis' 30 scouts attempt it. He knows where the false ground is. He knows which islands will hold weight and which will not. He knows where the water is deep and where it is merely dark. He positions his 8 men on real ground and leaves the false ground between them and the approach. And when Stannis' 30 scouts come through, they do not come through to find 8 men. They come through to find the neck itself, which has been waiting for them with complete patience. The mathematics of it take less than 20 minutes. Ned watches from the far side of the eastern channel. He does not go across. Jon does not need him to. A parley. Ned rides to the edge of Stannis' camp under a white flag, alone except for 2 riders. Stannis comes out to meet him with Davos and 2nd Kingsguard. They stop their horses 30 feet apart in the gray morning air at the neck's southern edge. What Ned says is not a threat. He is incapable of making threats the way other men make them, which has always been both his limitation and his most effective quality. What he says is a fact, stated in the flat, careful voice he uses for things that are simply true and do not require ornamentation. The circumstances of Robert Baratheon's death have been fully documented. Howland Reed's sworn testimony. Ned's own written admission. The physical evidence remaining at the Tower of Joy, catalogued by an independent maester and sealed. All of it registered with the Citadel, held by 3 separate parties, with instructions that do not require Ned to still be alive to execute them. If Ned or Jon dies by Stannis' hand, or by Stannis' order, the complete documented truth goes to every great lord in Westeros within a fortnight. Not Ned's version, the documented version. The version with witnesses and physical evidence and sworn testimony and Citadel seals. Stannis processes this in silence. Then, you're using the truth as a weapon. I've spent 15 years using a lie as armor, Ned says. I find the truth is heavier, but better balanced. It's still a weapon. Yes, and you know I'm not bluffing, because I've never bluffed in my life. A silence. The marsh sounds around them, birds, water, the specific quality of the neck's quiet, which is not actually quiet at all, but full of things that are listening. Stannis looks at him across 30 feet in 15 years, and the body of his brother, and everything else that stands between them. This conversation will continue, he says. Yes, Ned says. It will. They ride back to their respective camps. The parley ends without agreement. But Stannis does not press further into the neck that week, or the week after. 3 months in, the shape of the impasse is clear to everyone who is looking at it honestly. Stannis cannot take the north without spending his army in the neck. And spending his army in the neck means leaving his southern position exposed to the Tyrells and to whatever Doran Martell has been quietly preparing, and to Tywin Lannister's permanent, weaponized neutrality. Jon cannot march south with the force he currently has, though that force is growing as northern levies continue to arrive and as Howland Reed's crannogmen increase their commitment from harassment to something more deliberate. It is Davos who says it aloud. He goes to Stannis' tent late, after the advisors have left, and finds the king sitting in front of a fire with a map he has been looking at for longer than a map can answer any new questions. "Your Grace," Davos says, "the man you are fighting cannot be defeated by defeating him. His claim doesn't die if he does. His documentation doesn't die. The boy doesn't die." He pauses. "You can spend a decade in this bog and come out the other end with a kingdom that recognizes you as the man who tried to kill the rightful king." Stannis stares at the fire. "There may be a law you haven't considered. Your Grace." "What law?" "The one that says a man can be right and still lose," Davos says, "and wrong and still win. You've been right your whole life. Do you know what that's cost you in allies?" Honesty is not something I apologize for. No, Davos is quiet for a moment. But Ned Stark is also honest. He's just been honest about different things. And he has more allies than you do right now. Stannis looks at the map. He does not respond. But he does not tell Davos to leave. The final engagement of the Neck comes from Stannis' most aggressive general, who attempts a midnight crossing through a tertiary passage in the Eastern Marsh, a route that bypasses Moat Cailin entirely and requires a 12-hour overland approach through the deepest bog in the Neck. Howland Reed's scouts find the crossing 4 hours before it arrives. Jon commands the response. It is short and violent, and the bog does most of the work, which is what Jon counted on. He takes prisoners rather than killing the men he catches, not from sentiment, but from the specific calculation that prisoners carry information, and information is the real war and has been from the beginning. In the gray dawn afterward, Jon stands at the bog's edge looking at the captured men. Young, mostly, following orders in the way that men follow orders when the orders are given by someone they cannot refuse. He looks at Howland Reed beside him. How much more of this before he accepts it? Howland watches the dawn come over the marsh. Not much more. A man like Stannis only needs to see the mathematics clearly once. He's been seeing it for a month. He's almost finished. He's going to hate every second of accepting it. "Yes," Howland says. "That's how you know it'll hold." They stand in the cold together while the prisoners are taken north, and the bog reclaims the ground it temporarily lent to Stannis' ambitions. Stannis comes to the table, not in surrender, in recognition. The riders go back and forth for 2 weeks before the terms take their final shape. The venue is Moat Cailin, which is chosen by both sides because it is the only honest choice, the line where the north ends and the south begins, where neither party stands on the other's ground. Stannis rides north of his position to reach it. Jon rides south of his. They meet in the space between. What Stannis requires, his royal title recognized over the other 6 kingdoms, without qualification. An end to northern military expansion south of the Neck. A formal entry in the official record that Robert Baratheon died at the hands of Targaryen loyalists in the Red Mountains, the lie maintained not for Stannis' comfort, but for the stability of a realm that cannot absorb the full truth without fracturing. No military alliance between the North and any southern house without his prior consultation. What Jon requires, negotiated through Ned, his identity and claim formally entered in the official record and not suppressed. The North as a sovereign kingdom with full internal independence. His Targaryen claim to the throne of the 6 kingdoms preserved in law but held dormant. He makes no immediate move south, but the right exists, and is documented, and cannot be legally extinguished. And Ned Stark faces no trial. The regicide is acknowledged in a sealed document held by the Citadel, to be opened only in the event the peace breaks. It is not a clean document. Clean documents belong to clean situations, and this situation has not been clean since a dying girl made an impossible request of her brother in a tower in Dorne. What it is practical. What it is enough. The night before the signing, Stannis requests a private audience with Jon. Just the 2 of them. No advisors, no witnesses, no swords. Ned agrees without hesitation, which surprises no one who knows Ned, and surprises Stannis slightly. He had expected at least a considered pause. The room is small. Stone floor, 2 chairs, a table with nothing on it. A candle. They sit across from each other, the king of 6 kingdoms and the king of 1, and the candle divides the space between them with its small, uncertain light. Stannis looks at Jon for a long moment. Your father's act broke the law I spent my life enforcing. My father kept a promise to his sister, Jon says. You can call it what you want. I call it regicide. And I call it the only reason I'm sitting here, instead of being dead in a tower in Dorne at 2 days old. Jon holds Stannis's gaze. And the only reason you're sitting across from me negotiating a peace instead of bleeding another season into a neck bog. A silence that is neither hostile nor comfortable. Something between. You're not what I expected, Stannis says finally. What did you expect? Stannis considers this with the genuine care he applies to questions that deserve genuine answers. Rhaegar had his father's vanity. Robert had his own particular kind of bluster. He pauses. Your mother was fierce, by all accounts. I expected some combination of those things. Another pause. I got something else. You got Ned Stark, Jon says. Whatever else I am, I got Ned Stark. Stannis processes this. He raised you to be a king. He raised me to be worthy of one. He doesn't believe the blood does the work. He's never believed that. Jon looks at the candle. He believes the blood is just the beginning, that what you build on top of it is the only thing that actually matters. And what do you believe? Jon looks at him. At the man who has been his adversary and his honest examiner and the closest thing to a fair judge this situation was ever going to produce. I believe the blood opens a door, Jon says. What you do in the room is what matters. The silence that follows is longer than the others. Stannis sits in it with the stillness he has always used for things that require his full attention, which is everything. But some things more than others. He is looking at what Ned Stark built. Not the claim, not the blood, not the legal architecture assembled around this boy's existence. The actual thing, the boy in front of him, who keeps a knife at his belt and poison documentation in a citadel vault and has just articulated a philosophy of kingship, without appearing to know that's what he did. He does not say what he is thinking. Stannis rarely does. He says, tomorrow we sign. And then we will see. Yes, Jon says, we will. The signing is formal and brief. Both parties come to the table in Moat Caelin's great chamber, which smells of old stone and river damp, and the specific quality of a room that has witnessed things it cannot be expected to describe. The document is read aloud by Maester Luwin. Both parties sign. Howland Reed witnesses for the North. He makes his mark quietly, without ceremony, the way he has done everything in this story. Davos Seaworth witnesses for the South, and when he signs his name he writes it slowly and carefully, the way a man who taught himself to read always writes his name. It is not a glorious document. It is a practical one. But practical things, built correctly on honest ground, hold in ways that glorious things often do not. Stannis finds Ned alone in a corridor of Moat Caelin before the southern party rides. No one else present. No advisors. The corridor is cold and narrow and lit by a single torch, and they stand in it the way men stand in corridors when they have things to say that require no audience. I know what you did, Stannis says. I will not pretend otherwise, and I will not thank you for explaining it to me. Robert was my brother, and you killed him, and I have not forgiven you and likely will not. No, Ned says. If the boy becomes what he might be, what I observed in that room, history will call you wise. A man who sacrificed his honor to preserve a king the realm needed before the realm knew it needed him. A pause. If he does not, history will call you a murderer who built his lie on his best friend's body. History can call me what it likes. Stannis looks at him, at the man who has been carrying this weight for 15 years, and somehow looks neither broken by it nor indifferent to it. Just shaped. The way stone is shaped by water, not destroyed, but permanently different from what it was. I believe you mean that, Stannis says. He turns. He mounts his horse. His retinue falls in around him. The southern road opens before them, long and cold and leading back toward the 6 kingdoms he has governed alone for 15 years, and will govern alone for whatever comes next. He does not look back. He had better be worth it, Stark. He rides south. He does not look back. They crown him in the great hall of Winterfell. Not on the Iron Throne, that seat is not his yet, and may never be. And he does not want it the way other men want it, which is perhaps the most important thing about him. He sits in a chair of northern oak, plain and old and solid, the kind of chair a man could work in, and the crown they place on his head is cold iron, not gold. Iron, the metal of the North, the metal of the first men, the metal of people who built things to last rather than to shine. He is 15 years old. He is the product of 15 years of deliberate building. He is the son of a woman who died at 16, making an impossible request of the person she trusted most, and the ward, the son, in every way that is not blood, which means every way that matters, of the man who kept it. The great lords of the North fill the hall. They fill the galleries. They fill the yard outside where the doors have been opened, so the words can carry. The old words rise. Lord John Umber starts it, the same fist on the same table, the same voice that opened the hall when Ned made his declaration. Others join it. All of them join it. The King in the North. The King in the North. The King in the North. Jon sits in the seat and does not look triumphant. He looks the way Ned taught him to look, like the work is beginning, not ending. Like the words being said in this hall are not a reward for something finished, but a responsibility for something that hasn't started yet. He is looking at what he has to do, not at what he has done. He is, finally, himself. That night, the celebration fills Winterfell from the kitchens to the towers. Fire in every hearth, music in the yards, the sound of 15 years of held breath finally released into something that resembles joy. If joy is allowed to exist in rooms this cold, and in people who have paid this much to be in them. Ned is on the battlements. He is alone, which is where he goes when the weight of things requires the cold and the dark and the open sky. He is looking north, the way Starks always look when they need to look at something true. Jon finds him there. He always finds him there. They stand together for a while without speaking. The stars are out, sharp and cold and vast, the same stars that Lyanna used to name from a window at Winterfell when they were children, when the world had not yet required anything of either of them. She would have wanted to see this, Jon says. She wanted you to be safe, Ned says. The rest is yours. The wind, the sound of celebration below, muffled by stone and distance. Was it worth it? Jon asks. What you did. Ned is quiet. He is quiet for long enough that the question almost releases itself from the air, dissolves into the dark, becomes one of the things that goes unanswered because some things cannot be answered without lying, long enough that Jon is almost ready to let it go. I traded my honor for your life, Ned says. I would make that trade every time. Without hesitation. Without regret. A pause. But I will spend the rest of my life paying its price. Jon looks at him, at the man who made him, at the man who carried a lie for 15 years and a truth for 15 years simultaneously and never once put either of them down. At the man who is his father in the only way that has ever meant anything. Then don't. Jon says quietly. Don't spend the rest of it paying. Use it. Be here. Help me be worthy of what you gave. Ned turns away. He turns away so Jon cannot see his face. Jon looks at the stars and pretends not to notice, because he has learned this from Ned too, what dignity requires, and when to let a man have it. He has been learning it his whole life, and it is perhaps the most important thing Ned ever taught him. Below, Winterfell burns bright in the dark. Above, the stars are cold and clear. And tonight, the whispers say, the dragon and the wolf were never two things. They were always one thing. Waiting, let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.